on the wildfire response there as soon as the president speaks, or if we're able to get eyes on him during the tour of the neighborhoods, we will bring that to you as it happens. The Roundtable tonight is the culmination of this jam-packed day for President Trump. He started the morning touring hurricane damage 2,200 miles away in Asheville, North Carolina. There, he promised to help thousands of victims, some of whom are still living in RVs during the freezing winter. And when he arrived in California, he said he is now looking into reforming FEMA.
We're going to be doing something on FEMA that I think most people agree. I'd like to see the states take care of disasters. Let the state take care of the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all of the other things that happen. And I think you're going to find it a lot less expensive.
And reforming FEMA may be a bipartisan thing. Also, live pictures right now of President Trump and First Lady Melania. You can see with, I believe that's LA County Sheriff or possibly police in the Pacific Palisades area of California. So this is the tour through the neighborhoods that were burned out. The pictures you're seeing are coming to us from what is called the Pool, the small group of reporters and photographers who travel with the president, broadcast their pictures out. They're a little bit behind schedule right now in terms of the day that has been laid out from President Trump. So they'll typically walk around these neighborhoods. There'll be some residents that the president will hear from, get some eyewitness accounts to what happened. We've seen a very different Donald Trump today than we have over the past couple of years. Certainly President Trump with North Carolina flood victims in the way he interacted and the empathy he showed was very different than the Donald Trump we've seen in other disasters. This is a president, and we've said this all along, Donald Trump 2.0, which is what you're watching now, and is very different in governing style and now in interaction style than Donald Trump 1.0 was. This is a new man in the way both he deals with the public, in the way he embraces his role as president, the way he embraces his role as comforter-in-chief, and then also in the way he embraces his role as a leader. It looks like the Pool is in what we would call sort of a static position, waiting for the president to walk over here with law enforcement. So we'll stay with these pictures. The Pacific Palisades was the area of densely populated homes where entire blocks were burned to the ground. So there was 24 hours there where hundreds of homes burned down. It's also the place where there were enormous problems with firefighters getting the water. So as President Trump walks these streets, and something he's talked about before, firefighters showed up to these homes and there was no water. You saw President Trump and heard him blame Gavin Newsom for that, say that Gavin Newsom's policies put fish ahead of the residents and ahead of their safety. We now know that at least one of the water reservoirs in the Pacific Palisades was empty during the fire. How much President Trump is willing to discuss that and play politics versus how much President Trump is going to look forward is going to be quite interesting to see. We saw him very collegial with Gavin Newsom, perhaps to say at some level that Gavin Newsom perhaps was in a position where he had to be nice. We've lost the shot from the Pool. Oftentimes during these walks, President Trump, as the president moves along, what are called wranglers, the press wranglers move the Pool along to get various shots. You saw them right before the shot cut out stop in front of one of the homes that had been burned to the ground. And by that, there was only ash left. We don't know if during this part of the tour, President Trump is going to go ahead and meet with some of the victims. As we watch these pictures, we want to bring in Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, owner and executive chairman of the Los Angeles Times, who's been very outspoken on this and about the fire and the changes needed in California government. You might remember he made a lot of news about, 3 or 4 months ago now, sir, when you declined to endorse Kamala Harris. And that sort of changed the direction of the Los Angeles Times. So we're glad to have you with us, sir, as we watch these pictures. Did you ever think Los Angeles was going to be happy to see Donald Trump?
Well, I think now as the president, not only are we happy to see him, I think we need to see him. I think California desperately needs the help, especially as we're coming up to the World Cup 2026 and the Olympics in 2028. So I'm sure that all of Californians are really happy to see him.
Did you hear a different tone? I don't think Gavin Newsom has the ability to be contrite or humble, but perhaps a change in tone from him towards President Trump today?
Well, I think it's all politics at the end of the day. And what we're trying to do is really, from my perspective of the LA Times, is to voice really accountability. So now that the fire is sort of at least at a level of control, we need to really look forward to figure out how we can rebuild Los Angeles and California and have accountability. And I think the governor recognizes we need federal aid. And if that's accommodating, so be it.
Federal aid is going to be a huge part of this. There is discussion about whether that federal aid should come, in their words, with strings attached. But suffice it to say, and I think you make this point quite well, about accountability. Gavin Newsom seems to be throwing local officials under the proverbial bus and saying, I've done a great job. And the fact of the matter is, Gavin Newsom, and to that matter, Karen Bass, have done a very good job with what they said they were going to do. They were going to focus on DEI. They were going to focus on the homelessness problem. They were going to focus on green do-gooding. I'm going to interrupt you for a second and see if we can get some audio from the pool. Just stand by with us as we try to listen in to the president for a second.
Ja sam došla kad sam bila 10 godina. Da. Hvala Bogu. Dobro. Bili smo bolje. Jedan blok dole. Da. Sve moj muž. Da, Amerikanci.
Everyone. This is people in this community. Everyone feels lucky to be here.
Deals from my daughter, Nazi, and also the weeping finding of them right now.
The first time I saw him was actually at Halloween Park when we were 9 years old.
Pobili ste doma kad ste vidjeli da, ja imam naša kuća na ovoj strani, kad je počeo rat na ovoj strani, on je bio dosta naručio, kaže idi gore na balkon da vidiš, ja sam nazvala organstvo i htjela da idem, niko nisam mislila da dođe do
That has a lot of resources, but it's also a very multi-generational community with that don't have schools. And I think that a lot of people feel that we've been kind of abandoned and let down by local leadership. The fire department's been amazing, but they need more resources. And in order for us to go back, we need better infrastructure. We need to make sure this never happens again. Yeah. We're going to need small businesses. We're going to need, frankly, we're going to need help from you guys.
Oh my God, look at her little house.
So neat to have that connection.
I know. Speaking the language of the child.
I saw the comfort.
I know.
I saw the comfort in your face.
Yeah. So sad. Yeah.
Please help
we
me change this conversation.
She comes here and build a life in the house and family.
This is my second time
nothing and building up and become successful and then suddenly she has nothing done.
So we can't afford to
breaks my heart.
We're working on it.
All right. So what we're watching is the camera crew called the Pool that travels with the president walking down one of the burned out streets in Los Angeles. You saw President Trump there greeting some victims from the fire. First Lady Melania gave them a big hug as a woman was relaying her story. We'll listen in one more time here as they get reset. The president is a couple houses down. You can see some of the destruction there that now President Trump is seeing for the first time firsthand. I want to bring in also to the conversation Governor Chris Sununu, now recently the former governor of New Hampshire. Just in terms of this moment, Governor, I was really struck by how different Donald Trump seems, both in North Carolina and here, as he walked down this street. We've talked a lot about how he's been a different president for the past 4 or 5 days. But he's a different man. The hug with Melania, the way he's been interacting with these victims and comforting them, I've noticed a profound difference. Have you?
Oh, without a doubt. And I think there's a variety of reasons for it. But at the end of the day, he understands this is about people, individuals, connection. Look, when the president shows up at a disaster site, even when the governor shows up at a disaster site, it's not that you're there just to hand out cash. You're there to hear the stories. What's happening to these individuals? Understanding that if it's happening to the one person that gets the opportunity to talk to the president, it's that same story can be repeated actually 20,000 times over in a place like Palisades. So there's an absolute caring there. It's not political. It's not to fight with the press. I think I'm seeing it. I think everyone's seeing it. And you know what it's doing? Not just in this instance, but nationally, it's taking a lot of the polarization away. Right? People are wanting to engage in the conversation, watch the news, read the reports of what's really happening, because it's happening in a way that isn't about the fight. Now, I understand there are some other folks on the other side. I think Gavin and Pritzker and some other folks on a variety of issues are out there trying to create a firestorm, trying to create that fight, because at the end of the day, well, look, when it comes to bad management on bad governor's side, there's no better way to cover that up than with a political fight. But Trump is ignoring that right now. He's just getting to the heart and soul of what's going on. And it's absolutely tragic.
Yeah, there's the times that the president is the president. There's times he's the commander in chief. There's also times, to quote a good friend of mine, Kevin Corke, longtime White House correspondent, that he is the comforter in chief. And that is the role today. But I think, and I can't underscore this enough, the sort of calmness, the interest in others, the focus, the humanity that Donald Trump is displaying today, both in North Carolina and here, is quite different and noteworthy. Dr. Patrick,
look, he's not.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's clearly not for political reasons. This guy is not looking to get reelected again. He's not. Yeah. He's not out there trying to appease anybody other than just do the job, and that has to be appreciated on all sides.
Yeah, he's walking down once again towards the camera. So if he starts talking to residents again, we'll obviously, starts talking in a place where we can hear, we'll obviously listen in to the president. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong also with us, the owner of the Los Angeles Times. What's the headline tomorrow? Hold on one second, sir. We're just going to listen in to the president one more time. All right, he's a little bit too far away for us to hear what's going on. If he gets closer to the microphones. And there's something important about being a little bit far away, allowing the residents, the president, we saw First Lady Melania with a hug, be able to have these interactions without microphones and cameras in their face. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong with us, owner of the Los Angeles Times. What's the headline tomorrow about this visit?
Well, I think obviously I don't know exactly the actual wording, but I think what we should be showing is an amazing empathy and compassion. I mean, that hug that you just saw the First Lady, and it's wonderful that the First Lady is participating, is really a sincere from the heart hug of concern for the people. And that's, what we're doing this weekend is talking about love letters from LA, the resilience to try and inspire and help. But I think from a pragmatic, real world point of view, I have many, many friends in the Palisades, both in there, and then we also need to look at Altadena, where they're less fortunate. The real world practical point of view, these people now, in a sense, homeless. And how do we really help? And what we're going to do at LA Times is create the leadership council from the private sector. I think at the end of the day, the private sector needs to now come together where we can bring both resources, expertise, logistics, even figure out way where private equity can provide loans, how we can actually create builders who actually can build at scale, how we can build, I believe, for both Altadena and Palisades, the 21st century homes now that can fly. So maybe happening.
I hear you. You know, sir, I think there's been a real arc in how that Los Angeles Times has looked at things with you at the head from when you bought it. You endorsed Karen Bass for mayor. There's been a lot of other decisions. Then all of a sudden held back, didn't endorse Kamala Harris. And then have really, after the fires, I think, taken a much stronger look, as you called it, at competency at Gavin Newsom and at Karen Bass. But as I was saying before, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom were both pretty competent in the policies that they ran on. The green do-gooding and the DEI, they were very competent at all of that. They weren't competent in keeping the fire department funded and the reservoirs filled and clearing out brush and wildlife mitigation. I'm wondering if you're sensing, and perhaps even sort of decreeing at your paper, not only a change in looking at competency, but also changing and looking at the issues that are important.
Well, I think this is where when I meant the word competence, is not just competence in the sense of what you say and how your policies, but competence in understanding the real world logistics, operating a system, operating an organization. So, you know, and this is what happens with business people, where you really need to understand what affects the day-to-day real world working American. So, yeah, I think I've openly said we made a mistake when we did the endorsement of Karen Bass, and I openly then did block the endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris, because really competency does matter, but the competency in the sense of somebody who understands how to really operate a system that will benefit in the real world American.
Governor Sununu, you've been with presidents in disasters as governor. You've obviously had to sort of run a state. New Hampshire's a little bit smaller than California. But you know Gavin Newsom in a different way. In a time like this, what does a state need from the federal government? And at some point, does Newsom, you think, have the humility to accept it?
So it's a good question. So when FEMA, in these types of situations, everyone leans on FEMA, and they lean on FEMA primarily for funding and resources. The biggest problem with FEMA, I mean, there's a lot of problems with FEMA, by the way. It could take years for that money to actually get released. People don't realize that when there's a flood, when there's a disaster, FEMA comes in, they do their assessment. From the time that they do their assessment to the time the check is actually written can sometimes literally be years to states and towns and things of that nature. So you have this massive bureaucratic problem in that. In the moment of the disaster, it's kind of a little late now, but in the moment when the disaster is happening, go back to January 7th, 8th, 9th, that's really where you need the federal government to help provide and coordinate logistics in terms of water, shelter, the immediate needs of those who are homeless in that moment. And then they come in and they kind of do their assessment, and there's funds to come in and help on disaster relief. Look, I'm a governor, but I'll be the first one to tell you states have to do more on their own disaster relief. The fact that we only basically rely on the federal government to provide this disaster relief, it's almost like, where's our blank check? I don't necessarily agree with that. I really don't. Whether it's a flood in New Hampshire or a hurricane in Florida, you need some help, of course. But there's got to be much more accountability in that system, and I actually think President Trump is going to look at that. But it's the immediate needs after the disaster, the logistical coordination of what we call mutual aid. So, for example, Arizona provides supports. Colorado provides supports. Washington provides supports. Making sure that on the law enforcement, the firefighters, the National Guard, that's where the kind of cross-border logistic coordination can be very helpful on the federal government side. But that's more in-the-moment type stuff.
All right, so we'll just give you a sense of what's happening right now. With us, Chris Sununu, former governor of New Hampshire, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, owner of the Los Angeles Times. Donald Trump, as you can see, is walking through the Pacific Palisades neighborhoods. Those were the neighborhoods burned to the ground in the first hours of the fires a couple of weeks ago. And the president is on a disaster day, started in North Carolina with victims of Hurricane Helene, and is now here getting ready to greet firefighters from the fires in Los Angeles. We'll listen in. 2. All right, so President Trump outside one of the most devastated neighborhoods in the Pacific Palisades area. He, along with the First Lady, greeting firefighters and thanking them. The heroic stories of firefighters in those first hours of the fires are extraordinary. Oftentimes these guys in this neighborhood were showing up to homes on fire, hooking up their hoses to hydrants, and there was no water. So there will be time to litigate all that. Whether or not that's a discussion later. Listen to the president for a second.
People out there meeting the president. So you saved your firehouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor.
It's going to go fast. It's already going fast.
All right, so we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing the president. When the press pool that's traveling with the president is at these situations, understandably quite chaotic. You can see they park the fire truck sort of in a V, and then the president works the line of firefighters. Oftentimes, those selected to meet the president are those who have been through the absolute worst. So they're cleaned up and in their dress uniforms right now. But these would have been the crews that worked for 48 or 72 hours straight during the opening of the fires. You can see the First Lady there, along with President Trump. We've been talking for a little bit about just how different President Trump seems than when he did this during his first term. It's a very different affect. There's a humanity, dare I say, a confidence that is different for President Trump. The hug between Melania Trump and one of the victims was really extraordinary to watch just a couple of minutes ago. The picture's frozen that we're getting from the pool. It comes back with cell phones. As you can imagine, there's an awful lot of cell phones going off right around the president. As soon as we get those live pictures back, we'll head to him. He's supposed to talk for a minute with the firefighters about what he experienced there, and then go into this roundtable discussion with Mayor Karen Bass and others. With us, Governor Chris Sununu, former governor of New Hampshire, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, owner and executive chairman of the Los Angeles Times. Mr. Soon-Shiong, Doctor, appreciate your insights as you watch this. I think you think about California, and ordinarily that is ground zero for the resistance and the hatred of Donald Trump. Certainly that was led by Gavin Newsom for an awfully long time. I'm sensing here a total difference. We're going to see if we can listen into the president, though, 1 second before I get your answer.
Okay, and we're going to do it in 3, 2, 1, right here. 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Well, we won't let you down, fellas.
Sir, thank you, sir.
We have a positive project. You know, you want me to do, I will do it. You want to do real fast with more than one.
All right, we won't let you down is the words I heard from President Trump. He was gifted what appears to be a fire hat from the Los Angeles Fire Department. President Trump, when he's with law enforcement, is at some of his best. You can hear him certainly enjoying himself, and the firefighters and the police officers he met certainly seemed to enjoy being with the president. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, to you. Have you noticed a difference over the past couple of weeks in terms of how California is looking at Donald Trump? He was so negative and so harsh on Gavin Newsom and some of the policies there. Are the people in California saying, we may not love Donald Trump, but perhaps he had a point on some of these issues?
Well, I think, as you said, he's been critical to the response, and he's been right. And I think one has to you see that reaction even from the firefighters. It's really a heartfelt reaction of honor to meet him. You're right. There has been a change and a shift, and maybe rightly so. The president is a builder. He understands the working man and also the requirement need to build. And I think the encouragement he's giving to the Californians here is really encouraging. So, yeah, there is, I feel exactly, and I think the paper begins to understand that we are both red and blue now, and there has been a shift. And then at one point, California was Republican and then became Democratic, and so was the paper at that point. But I don't think this is a left or right issue. I think right now what we need to focus, this is an American Californian issue of a great need and a great state. And the president is showing great leadership here, and this is exactly what is needed. Common sense, competent leadership that has empathy and can really bring some help to the people that really need it right now.
All right, well said in many ways. Governor Chris Sununu knows an awful lot about competent leadership. Got to spend some time with him in New Hampshire, so I can speak to that. Right now, the pool, and President Trump's moving into this boardroom inside a firehouse to talk to Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, among others. We're going to sneak in a quick break here, ask that both the chairman of the Los Angeles Times, Governor Sununu, stick around with us. Live pictures of where the president is headed. We'll be back with his remarks in just a minute. It's about 4:30 in California. This is a firehouse in Pacific Palisades. This is the worst hit area of the Los Angeles fire. So the firemen in this house would have been up for 48, 72 hours fighting those fires, oftentimes without water, trying to drive their fire trucks and tankers back down hills and then drive back up into the flames. And those are the stories that President Trump is going to hear. This is a roundtable, includes the mayor of California. We saw him greet the governor of California at the bottom of the stairs of Air Force One. So President Trump is walking into a room full mostly of Democrats, if not all Democrats. You can see Karen Bass there, the mayor, waiting for President Trump. Over the past 12 hours, we have seen a very different Donald Trump. Donald Trump 2.0, comforter-in-chief, a role he may not have been totally comfortable with in his first term, is unbelievably comfortable in his second term. Warm embraces of the victims by the First Lady. In North Carolina, when he was walking through the flood areas of North Carolina, people who had lost everything in floods about 5 months ago and had been stiffed by FEMA and left out in the cold, literally, he was asking them on television which insurance companies stiffed them. So this is a very different moment in American history as Donald Trump makes his first trip as commander-in-chief, as president, but also as comforter-in-chief. Joins us now, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, executive chairman and owner of the Los Angeles Times, Governor Chris Sununu, now former governor of New Hampshire, watching along with us. Governor, as you see this, it's easy to say this is a made-for-TV moment, the roundtable listening session. Why is it important?
Yeah, this is absolutely critical. In a crisis, nothing is more important than transparency and communication, right? Transparency is the foundation of public trust when you're dealing with a crisis, when you're dealing with government. And what you're seeing, there's two real things I think that have to be brought out here. Number one, the fact that you have a president like Trump in these moments that will not just spend the time and take the questions and have honest conversations with those who have suffered and that have dealt with this on the ground, but he's going to do that with the press. We've already seen it in the first few days of his presidency. He's going to take any question and give his unvarnished answers in a very open way. And what that does, it gets people to engage. People want to watch that, and they want to engage with the news when it's on the ground if they believe it's at least transparent. And they might agree or disagree with the president, but at least they know where they're coming from. And I want to take this moment and just say, as a guy up here in New England, hats off to the LA Times. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on with Dr. Soon Shiung, but what the LA Times is really doing is saying, look, we're going to call the balls and strikes like we see them. We're not going to play a political game. This is a crisis, and we're going to deliver the news. We're going to deliver the story on the ground in an unvarnished way. And you know what happens? For a national story, people want to engage in it. And I can tell you, people here in New England, they're reading the LA Times stories. They're reading that frontline information because it doesn't come with political bias one way or the other. During the 2020 riots, nobody wanted to read what the Seattle papers and the Seattle News were reporting because it all came with this politicalization one way or the other. Right. So it didn't seem honest. It didn't seem real. It wasn't the real news story of that moment. But I think what the LA Times is showing to everybody is be unvarnished, call the balls and strikes like you see them, match that with the transparency of Donald Trump, whether you agree with him or not, and America is going to engage in that story.
Oh, they certainly already have engaged in the story because it crystallized so much of the fires of the divide and the argument, and also what's best in America, right? That the worst of times bring out the best in Americans. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, owner of the Los Angeles Times, with us. One thing that is remarkable about Americans is their willingness to forgive. What is required, though, is for people to come out and say, we screwed up and we're going to do better. Have you heard from either Karen Bass, the mayor, or the governor, that mea culpa of acknowledging that perhaps a lot of the policies that they had, for whatever good intentions were behind them, were flawed? And part of rebuilding has to be looking again at those policies that your papers criticized.
Well, sadly, I've heard from both, and sadly, the answer to that is no. And I think this is exactly what Governor Sununu just mentioned. I think what the public wants is complete transparency. I mean, I was the first to admit that when we endorsed Karen Bass, that was maybe a mistake. But we now need to move on and accept responsibility, especially if you're in leadership. My concern now is that I'm not hearing even direct conversations I've had with both the mayor and texts with the governor, this level of responsibility. In fact, the governor's put out words of misinformation, which is not true, and we're reporting, as you said, the balls and strikes and the facts. That's why I think the Leadership Council of the private sector, which I'm now pulling together at the LA Times, and we're just announcing that this weekend.
I have to ask, have you guys been invited to be in any of these meetings? Typically, it's the White House advance who's involved, but normally it's the local officials who set these kind of listening sessions or these roundtables up. Have you seen any interest by them to have somebody like yourself or Rick Caruso, the developer who's working in the Pacific Palisades, and others, sort of a diverse set of political views, to be here at this roundtable and have these conversations?
No. I can emphatically say no. So, look, it's sadly, in my mind, I'm a little jaded now. It was more quasi-expected. So what we've done at the LA Times is in this Leadership Council, I've already rounded up and identified amazing people who have actually stood up and said, we want to participate in rebuilding. Look, if you look at Maui, it's only 3 houses that's built in the last 18 months. That can't be. And I tweeted about that. So there's a real opportunity now for us to take this sad catastrophe and build thousands of houses in the most modernized way, with technology, with fire retardant material, with 5G, with connectivity, with water, with clean water, and the ability to actually really rejuvenate the place, but quickly. And the word quick can only be done, frankly, I believe, by harnessing the powers of people that understand logistics, understand scale, and bringing the private sector into this discussion.
It's an important point, and I think, Governor Sununu, you can speak to this as somebody who was not originally for Donald Trump, right? You endorsed Nikki Haley. I remember traveling around New Hampshire with you about a year ago, a little bit more before the New Hampshire primary with Nikki Haley. And I'm thinking there's no one who enjoys the romance of reconciliation more than Donald Trump. And I'm listening to Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong from the Los Angeles Times talk about how they need people with logistics. They need people who want to build. They need people who want to innovate. These are the kind of words that Donald Trump loves to hear and engage in. Where do you see, Governor Sununu, where do you see both Governor Newsom, Mayor Bass, and this intransigency of their own positions?
Yeah. So, let's go back to the policies that I think we're talking about here. There were actually, I've seen actual papers and some policies that were passed in California following the previous tragic fires where many people died, and they talked about thinning out the forest management, getting rid of the dead material, providing better infrastructure, tabletop exercises. They just didn't do it. They didn't do it. And this is a great example of you should never give a politician credit for just spending money. You should never give a politician credit for passing a bill. It's all about results. We have to get back to demanding better results and accountability from government officials and allowing them to say, hey, we tried these 5 things, but these 2 didn't work. That's okay. We're going to pivot. We created nimbleness in our policies and what we're doing, and we didn't get the results we wanted, so we're going to pivot. These guys didn't even try. They passed policies, they took credit for it, but they didn't actually do the work. And that's why I'm no defender of the insurance companies, don't get me wrong. But I think what you're going to find is that's why a lot of insurance companies, after 2 years, came back and said, guys, you didn't do any of the risk management. You didn't do any of the things we said you had to do to make sure that we could insure these people. And they're going to use that as an excuse to pull out. But whether it's the governor of California or the school board in Des Moines, Iowa, let's start holding all officials accountable to their actions, not just their words during a campaign.
It's a great point. And so many of the insurance companies pulled out of Pacific Palisades and other areas. State Farm, among others, canceled policies. Dr. Soon-Shiong, it brings up an interesting point because Donald Trump is here. This Friday is disaster travel day. He started in North Carolina, where FEMA definitely dropped the ball on helping residents in North Carolina who'd been flooded and their houses destroyed right after the hurricanes came through. A number of the insurance companies stiffed him. It was something that Donald Trump was asking residents about today. FEMA dropped the ball, and now they're getting help. President's now in California. But the other huge story that's happening right now is the immigration debate. And you've got ICE and Customs and Border Patrol and the FBI and others out in force in Los Angeles and San Diego, and along the rest of major American cities, Boston as well, up in the Northeast. We're seeing video put out by the White House of deportations. It's something that President Trump's talked about on this trip. Are you noticing a change towards, I don't want to say conservatism, but even in Los Angeles, a realization that perhaps some of Trump's policies may not be all so bad?
Well, I don't think anybody would disagree that if you have criminals and people with criminal activity, for which we have apparently identified 1 million of these immigrants, that they should be removed. I think.
Oh, there's a lot of people would disagree with you. Would disagree with that.
Well, I think if you look at the safety of the nation and the safety of the children, etc., that may potentially be harmed. I don't know how you could disagree with the fact that if these have been, validated, adjudicated, understood in a normal sense, that these are indeed criminals that are now on the loose, that they should not be sent back to wherever they came from. I don't think anybody would or should in a sensible way. And this is about the common sense again, and it's not Republican or Democrat. I think it's, look, I'm an immigrant. I came through the HB1 visa status, came through, we lived the American dream. But we live, hopefully, a honest and safe life. And I think this is where there's a differentiation that needs to be made.
President of the United States walking into now a roundtable. Gentlemen, stay with us. With law enforcement and politicians, you can see the First Lady there as well. President Trump still carrying the hat gifted to him by the Los Angeles Fire Department. We'll see if we have any audio from the pool. All right, so President Trump and the First Lady going around the round table, shaking hands. We've seen people from CAL FIRE, other firefighters, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department as well. We're in this together, as I believe what the sign says there. We'll now see if the president sits down or goes around greeting Karen Bass, the mayor there of Los Angeles, welcoming him there to one of the firehouses that dealt with the worst parts of the Palisades fire. You can hear the firefighters in the background. And these would have been the guys who spent 24, 48, 72 hours on the front lines without getting a break, oftentimes without water in the hydrants, fighting a losing battle against a fire that destroyed upwards of 10,000 homes. So President Trump shaking hands. As we've heard, not necessarily at this roundtable, is the developers and some of the, shall we say, more vocal critics of Karen Bass and of Governor Gavin Newsom's efforts and priorities over the past couple of years. We're going to see now how much President Trump talks and how much he listens. We've noticed, certainly during this trip, a very different Donald Trump in terms of his empathy and his ability to connect, his willingness to engage, especially with the victims in North Carolina, was asking people, what insurance companies stiffed you? What's happened? What's happening with your insurance claim? Governor Sununu, Chris Sununu, formerly the governor of New Hampshire, still with us. You've been at these moments. What is he talking about with local officials?
Well, he's reassuring them that they're being heard, that there are still there are actions to be taken. And what they say, their input actually matters. And that will help what he's going to do. He didn't necessarily, again, come with checks out of his pocket, but he's going to take that, bring it back to D.C., and then figure out whether it has to be, something through Congress, emergency actions, whatever it needs to be done. But you really need to take all that in. And again, it's some of it's detailed. Some of it's hearing the detailed stories and having that empathetic compassion. But these are the folks that for 3 weeks have barely slept.
Listen in.
Unfortunately, it's a very sad period, but what makes you feel good is I met so many of the homeowners, and every one of them, a lot of them, and every one of them said to me they want to rebuild. I said, will you go elsewhere? No. It wasn't even like a question. They love the area. They love the people. It's like a family. It's incredible, actually, when you see some things like that. We just left North Carolina, and we had just a similar type of disaster. It was water instead of fire, but boy, that water did damage like I've never seen before. And then you come here and you see this. But the people are so amazing, and your fire department was so beautiful. Every one of them is in perfect physical shape. I said, what do you guys do? They have very high standards, I can tell you. And we took pictures with all of them, but very nicely they gave us a little helmet, and I said, you wear this, huh? Is this real? And they said, yeah. I said, it's awfully heavy. You have to be very strong to wear that. But that's the original, right? So it's pretty good. But I just want to thank everybody. We're going to be with you. Your governor met us at the plane, and we had a good talk, very, very positive talk. We have to work together to get this really worked out. I don't think you can realize how rough it is, how devastating it is until you see it. I didn't realize. I mean, I saw a lot of bad things on television, but the extent of it, the size of it, we flew over it in a helicopter. We flew to a few of the areas, and it is devastation. It's incredible. It's really an incineration. Even some of the chimneys came down, okay? When you have the chimneys come down, that's pretty hot stuff, and a lot of them were down. That was a bad sign, too. But I just want to commiserate and we're going to celebrate. We'll be back to celebrate one day soon, I hope soon. The federal government standing behind you, 100%. The First Lady and I are in California to express a great love for the people of California. I've had great support always in California. We did very well recently, as you know, relatively speaking, at least I can say. And it's been amazing. I have property in California, not too far away, actually, right up the road in Palos Verdes, a big property. And I've always loved it. I've always loved being here. But we have to grieve for the 28 Californians who have tragically perished. And sadly, you're going to be finding more. And that's going to be very sad because I know people are missing. And when you look at that kind of incineration, you know what's going to happen. You're going to find some more. But with all that we've gone through, I watched your firefighters, and they were really fighting at a big disadvantage. I got to know a lot of them just now, and they're incredible people. They were so happy. They were saying, congratulations, sir. You know, they're thinking about country maybe even before this location that they all love. But I'm pleased to be joined by many of the great California leaders, both Democrat and Republican. And it's an honor to meet some of you I didn't know, but I know every one of you by name. LA County Supervisor Catherine Barger. Thank you, Catherine, very much. Mayor Karen Bass. Thank you, Karen. It's nice to meet you. Representatives Jay Obernolte. Where's Jay? Jay, hi, Jay. It's been a tough period, Jay, right? Vince Fong, Kevin Kiley, Vince and Kevin, hi. Hi, Vince. A man I know very well. I know him too well, actually. And I say that actually with love because he's actually been a great congressman for a long time, and he's a great leader, and he loves the area as much as anybody, right, Daryl? So, Daryl, I say, young Kim, congratulations on an excellent career. I appreciate it. Another one I know pretty well is, to put it mildly, is Tom McClintock. And he's been with us for a long time. We have some interesting things going on in Washington. And it's an honor that you guys are here. Thank you, Daryl, very much, Tom. George Whitesides. Good, George. Thanks. It's a great name, too, by the way. Brad Sherman. Oh, I know Brad well. I know Brad, but that's all right. We're on the same side of this one. I know that. We'll work together, Brad, very well. A lot of respect. And Presidential Envoy Rick Grinnell, who's done a fantastic job for me over the years. He was ambassador to Germany, and he was fantastic. So 2.5 weeks ago, over 100-mile-an-hour winds transformed the Palisades fire and other areas, too, into absolute infernos of death and destruction. And this is already the most expensive natural disaster, they say, in American history. That's pretty amazing. The numbers are going to be staggering. Most importantly, we have to get it built, and we have to hopefully find as few people as possible. We have already too many, 28 at least, they say. We're going to work very hard with the mayor, the governor, the supervisor, and everybody, and get the resources behind you. We have some amazing people, and we have some amazing fighters for things like this. I also had the concept of getting some of the best developers in the country. I've had so many calls from developers, and they want to come in. They don't want anything. They just want to come in and help, and they really know how to get things done and get things built. I would ask that the local officials, because we're going to essentially waive all federal permits. We're going to have you go very quickly because a federal permit can take 10 years. We're not going to do that. We don't want to take 10 days. I would. So we're declaring this a national emergency. By doing that, I can give you immediate permits. I'd ask that the local permitting process be the same. Some of the people were saying they're going to be forced to wait 18 months for their permits, and I don't think you're going to do that. I can't imagine that. So they are literally in a position right now they'd like to start tonight, and they'll clean their site, they'll do everything. They just want to start, and they were very concerned with the 18 months, so I'm sure you can get it down to, I would say, not even 18 days. They are ready, Mayor. They are ready to start. I met so many of them. The fire took place. It's nice and cool there now, and they want to start taking the debris. They want to take the debris. They want to do everything. They'll get rid of everything. They're going to do it by their own hand. And you're going to see some amazing things happen. So we're waiving the federal permits. Either waive them or give them to you so rapidly it's going to be essentially the same thing, but we're going to try and just waive them, and we'll rely on the local. But the local, I hope, is going to do the same exact thing. They're literally ready to start right away tonight. So if you could do almost the same thing or the same thing would be great. For a building permit, you're going to have to, check things out a little bit. A lot of them, every single one of them said they're going to rebuild. I didn't have one person say they're selling or they're leaving or they're disgusted. They love their community, and it's incredible. We even had one from your neck of the woods, right? Yeah. Do you want to stand up? It was so nice the way she greeted my wife in a very different language, right? And it was very nice to see. And you're staying, and you're going to rebuild, and everything else. Yeah, everybody. So it's really great. So I'm signing an executive order to open up the pumps and valves in the north. We want to get that water pouring down here as quickly as possible, let hundreds of millions of gallons of water flow down into Southern California, and that'll be a big benefit to you. If you don't want it, you're going to tell me, but I can't imagine it. I tell you who does like it is the fire department. When I said that, they were very happy with that. They didn't mind hearing that. But we have a lot of water that is available, and I hope you can work that out among yourselves. But I think this will show that we have to have that water. We have to have that water. You're talking about unlimited water coming up from the Pacific Northwest, even coming up from parts of Canada, and it pours down naturally. It has for a million years. For a million years, it pours down. You'll never run out. You'll never have shortages, and you won't have things like this. And when you do, you'll have a lot of water to put it out. So I'm going to ask that you figure that out. But I really strongly recommended this 7 years ago, and I think I'm going to just do it. If you have big problems, you're going to let me know, but I just can't even imagine it. But we're also surging federal resources and assistance to the state, and California must adopt the common sense policies to prevent fires, and we all know that. We were talking 7 or 8 years ago, I was talking to people from Austria, people from Finland, people that live in forests. One of the gentlemen, one of the top great leaders of Austria, said, we don't have forest fires, and we have trees that are actually far more flammable than they have in California, but they literally rake their forest. They take down, if a tree comes down, they take it down. They say you have 18 months. After that, it's like a matchstick. And I know environmentally, some environmental groups like the trees to just melt into the ground, but when they do melt into the ground, they become an inferno. So I think you're going to have to change your ways in terms of that. You have 30 years of leaves, and those leaves are dry as a bone, and they burn. Interestingly, because I was at Paradise, who is the general, right? A long time ago, I was at Paradise. What a beautiful paradise it was. And how is it doing, by the way? Are they rebuilding, right? Remember when he said, you were up here, President. I went there. I never saw anything like it. But you know what amazed me? I'll never forget it. The trees were okay, because the trees are loaded with water. They sucked that water out of the ground. And this was an inferno, just like, I would say, no different than this. And it was also the wind that caused a lot of problem. I mean, you had tremendous winds that there's not a lot you're going to do with. You had up to 100-mile-an-hour winds. It's unheard of. But when I was in Paradise, I noticed that the trees, they were dark on the bottom, but they were absolutely living, and they lived because they're soaking wet. But the trees that were on the ground, within 12 to 18 months, they say 18 months at a maximum, you have to cut them up, take them away because they're matchsticks. But we saw that. You saw that with me. I commented at the time. I said, look at this. The house is burned down and the tree is standing, and it's, other than being a little different color on the bottom, and it went through an inferno. It's amazing. It's soaking wet. So I think they have to do it. It's called management of the floor. And when the gentleman from Austria and also Finland and other countries, they said we manage the forest floor very, very carefully, and we don't have forest fires. You know, they just don't have them. So I'm sure you're going to do the same thing. So there can be no golden age without the Golden State. It's a great state. It's a fantastic place, and we're going to have a big celebration soon. We're going to come back, and we'll come back as much as you need, and we're going to turn it around, and we're going to open the coffers. You know, America wants us to be taken care of. This was a horrible thing to watch, and the way it just kept going and going, and then they'd find another area. It was like a genius on the other side. The fire was a genius, the way it kept moving, but we're not going to stand for it. I just met with the Olympic people, and they're all set to do a real job. So we have the Olympics, and I got them. You know, it was very interesting. I made the deal with the Olympics. I was called by your former mayor, and he said, would you call the Olympics? Because I must tell you, the Democrats, as you know, were not calling. They wouldn't do it. I don't know, there was a bad experience somehow. And I did, and I got along great with the Olympic Committee, and we got the Olympics, and then we got you the World Cup. That one I focused on with Gianni. Gianni was great, the head of it, and so you have that coming. And then we have the 250 years coming up, which is going to be a great celebration. But I'll never forget when I got the Olympics, and then I was president when I got them. I said, oh, boy, it's too bad I won't be president